That's my turn. 6:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Jonathan Fahey. Always great to have you on. Thanks for waiting a little while through that commercial break. Hey, Jonathan, let me ask you a question. So we've got this audio I want to play for you. So last night, of course, you're former director of ICE under Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, and when you were with Donald Trump, I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of a brain fart, Jonathan. Hold on. I want to start this over. There was audio last night from this interview with Bret Baier and Kamala Harris, and he asked her about whether or not she would apologize to the families of Jocelyn Nungary, Rachel Marin, and Laken Riley, and this is what transpired.
Jocelyn Nungary, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I'm so sorry for her loss.
So basically, seems to me, Jonathan, that when she says, I'm sorry for her loss, she meant their loss, but that's really not an apology. That really is like saying, I'm sorry that you're upset. That's not really an apology.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really just so insulting to the families of them and everyone else. There are lots of people throughout this country affected in a very negative way by this. And there's no acknowledgement or no acceptance of responsibility for anything with this administration because, these policies, and you could tie, Laken Riley's death, you can tie it to multiple policy fails of the Democratic Party. That if they didn't support sanctuary cities, if ICE was willing to deport people that they didn't have to wait to be convicted of an aggravated felon, if they didn't if they detained them instead of catch and release. So there's like 3 policy failures that led to her death. That all of them were preventable, and if Donald Trump was the president, you can't say for certain people might have been able to sneak in and stuff, but you could realistically say. So these deaths and some other ones would have been prevented and wouldn't have happened. I think that's totally fair to say.
One of the things I thought was interesting last night is that, and I wanted to have you on to talk about the illegal immigration aspect of this. We had Bret Baier immediately. I mean, first question was about illegal immigration. And I thought it was interesting that she just wants nothing to do with even admitting or acknowledging the executive orders that Joe Biden put forward on like day one of his administration, because it is those executive orders that basically peeled away all of Donald Trump's immigration policies. And so for Kamala Harris, she's not even acknowledging or refuses to acknowledge that those even took place. Instead, she is choosing to focus on I'm just air quoting here, and I'm so tired of saying it, but the bipartisan immigration bill that she says that Donald Trump killed, which he didn't. But talk about what Joe Biden did on day one that Kamala Harris refuses to acknowledge.
Well, yeah, like you're exactly right. And it goes back to the 2020 campaign that they basically were campaigning against ICE. They were essentially saying any deportation, they would always use this phrase, that's not who we are, and things like that. But I think, the main thing, I think the most effective among Donald Trump's policies is probably this Remain in Mexico policy, that if you want to come to this country and claim asylum, fine, but you need to wait in Mexico until your claim has been adjudicated. And they took that away, and that is one of the greatest tools, not just to keep people out that are claiming asylum, but it also deters false asylum claims, because if you know your claim is false, which 5% of them are, you're never even getting in to begin with, as opposed to now, when your claim is false, this administration not only lets you stay, they give you every benefit more than you and I get, and then we know at the end of the road, they're going to get to stay anyway, and they've more or less said that. They're not going to do any mass deportations. They act like that's cool, so that means all of these people that have falsely claimed asylum and eventually get through the system and have their asylum claims denied, guess what? They get to stay too. But yeah, I think that was the most critical, but I think the number is like 70 or 80 something, but they went in there before they even took office, they had a plan to revoke all of these things that could make it tougher, for people to come here illegally. And also what they did, they made it tougher for law enforcement, for ICE agents, for Border Patrol agents, to enforce the law. So even the ones that wanted to, we know what's happened to them. So, this idea that she had nothing to do with it. I mean, I do believe she doesn't have a lot of knowledge about what's going on, but she is certainly responsible. She was fully supportive of not supporting ICE and wanting ICE to be, whatever reimagined or whatever the heck she says. But, from day one, they wanted this to happen. And that's the underlying truth that you and I know and most of your listeners know. This was intentional to bring in illegal aliens. Right. It's not like they tried things and they weren't very good and they failed. It's not like, they are incompetent, but in this area they're not. They actually wanted this to happen. So, and, no one, some people are reluctant to touch that. And I know Bret Baier, didn't go down that road. But I think, that's the only reasonable inference, that they want as many illegal aliens to come into the country as possible.
Well, I think the reason why Bret Baier didn't go down that road is because that would have distracted from the bigger picture that most Americans see, which is just the massive crush of illegal immigration. If he had thrown that in there, that you want them to come in so that eventually they'll vote for, your party, the Democrats, that sort of changes the entire conversation. Then people start talking about how, Bret Baier is a conspiracy theorist and all of these other things, the great replacement. And that's going to confuse the issue. I think, because people brought that up to me last night, and I think that Bret Baier, he would have been justified if he brought that up. I just don't think that he needs to, because that would distract and confuse people that aren't in the political weeds like you and I are, and Bret Baier is as well. Appreciate you listening to Super Talk 99.7, Jonathan Fahey. So let's talk a little bit more about illegal immigration. Then we're going to move away from that and talk about a few other things related to the interview. But I guess part of what is going on with this administration is just a complete and virtual no accountability. They don't want any accountability for anything that they have done or haven't done. And I think that when you and I watched this last night, and millions of the American people watched this last night as well, I don't think that Kamala Harris came off real well. I don't. I think that she came across argumentative, and she clearly didn't answer the questions.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right. And, the one affirmative sort of campaign they had for her was this joy thing, right? So that's gone. So there's really no affirmative case they could even make for her to be the president. But yeah, everything about it, I think they wanted her to go in there and stick it to Donald Trump and show she's tough. But if she really just came across as, defensive, just poorly informed, which it's still stunning to me, even though I don't think she has any real knowledge of any of the issues facing her. I'm surprised that they cannot prepare her to at least have a handful of facts to throw back at them. And that's the thing that's just stunning to me.
Jonathan, that is a great point. That is a great point. She's only got talking points, and the talking points, by and large, they're not even true. But you're right. You would think that they would arm her with, well, actually, Bret, and then just throw out some facts. But she doesn't. It's the same old talking points and platitudes that we've been hearing for the last couple of months.
Yeah, and it's just so amazing is that she won't do the homework, which that's when you hear sort of things under the radar, you would hear these things about how she doesn't prepare for briefings and stuff like that. But it's almost like she's had this whole career of just sort of coasting along and never having to do the work, that I think now it's almost like a shock to her that she's being held to some, and I just say some accountability. She's still been given a crazy easy ride in this thing. I mean, handed the nomination, glowing, remember all these studies talking about how favorable the press was for her, at least the first month or so. I don't know if it's still the same. And then all of the interviews, even when they're serious interviews, and I say serious, like Dana Bash, she's given her multiple choice questions and trying to prod her along and help her. So it's pathetic though. Yeah, she should be able to, on any question, be able to have 3 or 4 points, and And whether or not, like you said, whether or not they're great, it would still make her look good.
Well, let me play you what let me let me play for you what Brian Stelter, who's of course back on CNN, and this is what he said about the performance of Kamala Harris.
I think this strategy from Harris was a Google strategy. She wanted Fox viewers to start to Google some of the things she was saying, because some of the comments she was making in this interview are foreign to the Fox audience. For example, General Mark Milley saying Trump is a fascist to the core. That's barely been covered on Fox News. So she was able to get some of those talking points in. This was the most adversarial interview Kamala Harris has probably ever done. Instead of getting to debate Trump again, she got to debate Bret Baier. And a lot of viewers are going to come away saying, wow, she's willing to do that. That's a sign of toughness and strength.
So, number one, I'm going to throw out my opinion, then you can talk about Mark Milley. But I think that Donald Trump supporters and Fox News, we're so used to people calling Donald Trump a fascist that it's not really news.
Yeah, and I think that's, when all they have, and you almost feel like at the end of that for Brian Stelter, it's like, nice try, Brian. I mean, this was a disaster. But the Mark Milley thing or any of these things, it's funny. The only thing they can say about Donald Trump is like, oh, he said this mean thing. What do you have to say about this? Or he exaggerated a crowd size. But they never can attack him on policy, because it's like they have to, at least they're implicitly admitting that during the Trump years, people in this country were better off, they were safer, and our national security was far better. We were far better off national security-wise during his presidency. I don't even think that's arguable. So it's just like he said this mean thing behind closed doors, and I think people are tired of that. But it's like Brian Stelter is like, yeah, that was really the strategy. It's like that's all they have, and I don't think people really. I mean. Outside of our world, Mark Milley isn't really a household name. What he says, whatever. I just don't see that being something that moves the needle.
No, and he and Donald Trump had some serious, and still do have some very serious differences regarding policy. So for, Mark Milley, and this, this was in a book by Bob Woodward, it's just the American people, and certainly I think Donald Trump supporters don't care if, somebody once again is calling Donald Trump a fascist, because, that's like every day. So to me, it's not that big of a deal. I think most people agree with that as well. Jonathan Fahey, always great to have you on. I appreciate it. I'll have you on again soon.